Welcome back. You tuned into the Tuesday edition of Good Morning Namibia. South Africa's State Capture Commission released part 1 of its inquiry report. 4 years later, and over 800 pages of part 1 of the State Capture report highlights serious inefficiencies in the country's state-owned entities. President Cyril Ramaphosa described receiving the report as a defining moment in South Africa's history. With more on this developing story, I'm now joined by Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, who teaches political science at the University of Johannesburg. Good morning, Prof, and welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Hi, good morning, Denver. Delighted to be here.
Very well, Prof. As shared in the introduction, part 1 of the report was released. Please walk us through that.
Well, in total, we are going to have 3 reports. This one is the first part and has, I think, 4 chapters, if I'm not mistaken, that concentrate or focus on a number of issues. One, the dismantling of the government communication agency and how that was kind of hijacked by the Gupta family wanting to take their budget and give it to their media outlets, the New Age, as well as their television station. There's one on SAAA, another on SARS, as well as our general procurement system. And it's quite thorough. Here's the thing I think we should look for as we go through these reports, because the testimonies were provided in public. And so we should look to see whether the reports captures the testimonies. Is it specific? Does it identify particular individuals? And whether it makes specific recommendations. Because our concern from the beginning was that we wouldn't want to have a whitewash really, Yeah. So a number of recommendations have then been made, and they vary. There are people who are directly involved, such as, for instance, President Zuma's appointments, or appointees rather, to specific institutions.
Thank you, Prof. Before we move to the recommendations, of course, a very important part of the report, I think it's important to also take one slight step back. Help us understand in layperson's terms, what exactly is state capture and what had been captured under these circumstances, allegedly?
Well, the executive, which is government, exercises authority on behalf of the state, which is a sovereign entity. The state, of course, formulates laws. Some of those laws are directed to the state by parliament, and parliament is a representative of public interest, of voters. So they direct the executive, that is government. So whatever government does, therefore, should be in pursuit of the interest of voters that are articulated through parliament. And also when they are sworn into government as ministers and as president, government takes an oath. The individual members, they take an oath to uphold the interest of the republic. What has happened here with state capture, what it means is that other interest individuals and companies outside of this mandated body, that is parliament, in violation of the oath that government took, they implemented policies, insisted on the provision of money illegally. So this money that they insisted should be issued was not mandated by parliament, neither was it in the interests of the voters. And the decisions they took, some of them went against cabinet protocol. So for instance, the Gupta family would tell the president who to appoint in his cabinet and what company to give a particular contract to do business. So that means that the president surrendered executive authority to this family of Indian immigrants who just arrived in this country now. So the sovereignty of the republic had been usurped by these immigrants, this immigrant family of Indians.
Thank you for that very comprehensive overview, Prof. There cannot be a dispute, thus, of the far-reaching impact of state capture. Please help us understand the extent to which this state capture eroded members of the public's confidence in the rule of law, the strength of public institutions, as well as law enforcement agencies.
Well, if you know that you are breaking the law, obviously, the first thing you would want to do is to ensure that the law does not catch up with you. So our president obviously had been evading the law for quite some time, meaning the previous president, Jacob Zuma. He came in facing legal problems. So his first attack was at state institutions. Institutions like the Scorpions, which had been set up to investigate corruption, Public Prosecution Authority. So this happened, as soon as he won ANC presidency in 2007, he started immediately in 2008, even before he became president. And after he became president in 2009, then he went on a serious assault. And of course, what he then did was to facilitate state capture. So already he came into the presidency facing legal problems, exacerbated that by creating even more impropriety, which made it for him even more necessary to launch a war against state institutions.
Thank you, Prof.
So a lot of things happened.
Prof, for purposes of context and for the record, just briefly help us understand why you're referring to state capture in this context as a fact and not as an allegation.
While you've had a commission, you've had people testify. These are not rumors. It's not people telling you that there's a wild beast in the ocean that has a long tail, but no one has ever seen it. These are not fables, not a mystery. They are facts. They are bank accounts, correspondence. So yes, it is a fact.
Now, Prof, President Cyril Ramaphosa said, and I'd like to quote, "It was the people of this country who in their various formations stood up to what they saw as acts of gross wrongdoing and abuse of power." Would you say that the voices of ordinary South Africans were finally heard?
Yes, they were heard. There were protest marches, well-attended protest marches, with specifically clearly articulated messages. The ANC, the ruling party that Cyril Ramaphosa had, was quiet on this matter. They did not want to investigate it. They purported to be ignorant of what had happened. A few of them, including Raymond Lamula, who's Justice Minister now, was one of the few courageous ones who urged the ANC and used to protest outside of ANC meetings. But by and large, the ANC was forced by the public to act on this, and ultimately they adopted the investigation in 2007 Nasrec conference. Remember, this commission has its roots from Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's report. And Parliament then, which was under Jacob Zuma, assailed Thuli Madonsela. They even called a CIA agent. That whole Parliament. And now you'd find very few of them who would claim that they were culpable. So the ANC was complicit in state capture, secondly, in trying to suppress Madonsela's investigation. So the public voice, protest, helped in bringing that up. And fortunately, our judiciary stood their ground. That is why we are here.
Prof, you earlier made reference of the recommendations contained in part 1 of the report. Let's please elaborate on some of the key recommendations.
Well, I'm not sure if I have key recommendations. I haven't finished reading the report, but I'll just tell you about some of the recommendations. You need to investigate people who facilitated and enabled state capture. These are people who were appointed into boards, like Dudu Myeni, for instance, who's always been described as President Zuma's close friend, whatever that means. You have officials, executive officials, or executive managers in places like SAA and GCIS who signed off on instructions that were clearly irregular. You have also people like Jimmy Manye, who, when Jimmy came in as CEO of the GCIS Government Communication Service, redirected the budget for advertisement towards the Gupta TV station as well as the newspaper, even though the newspaper especially had no verifiable number of readers, but they got the second highest allocation in terms of advertisement. That alone defies logic, because to advertise, you need audience, but this newspaper we didn't know how many readers it had, but they got the highest allocation of that year. So these are some of, as well as the former SARS boss, for instance, Moyane, who dismantled a tax collection agency on which revenue the Republic relies to provide services. And this is what the former President Thabo Mbeki has called a counter-revolution.
Thank you, Prof.
Because for a country like South Africa, go ahead.
Prof, as we conclude, we've unfortunately run out of time. What is it that needs to happen immediately and perhaps in the medium and long term to restore the confidence in the rule of law, in public institutions, but also law enforcement agencies in the Republic of South Africa?
There's been some improvement in terms of how law enforcement agencies have been working, especially the public prosecution and the investigative unit. Good appointments, 1 or 2 prosecutions, but we remain extremely worried that progress is quite slow, that we don't have a sufficient number of investigators and skills to pursue some of these recommendations and evidence that is coming up. So that is our concern. Government has been talking a good game, that we want these prosecutions to happen, but that talk has not been sufficiently matched by allocation of required resources. So that is our concern. And of course, there will be some resistance from members of the ruling party, some of which are going to be subject of investigation. Already their national chair, Gwede Mantashe, was saying this report should not be used to get rid of people, but as a mere lesson on what not to do, which is basic nonsense, of course. You see within the ruling party, there's concern. They might try to do all sorts of tricks, and they're capable of that. So again, the public should be on the alert, pressurize the president to provide necessary resources to the state to do its job.
Prof, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for sharing your expertise this morning.
All right, Debba. It's been excellent, my debut.
Thank you very much. That was Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, who teaches political science at the University of Johannesburg, helping us understand the scope, magnitude, and gravity of state capture in neighboring South Africa following the report released by the Zondo Commission.